The first two I shall discuss will be honor and vanity, which in the chain of metaphysical fabrics of the cosmic balance are opposing forces of each other. The technical definition of each is this: 1. Honor, honesty, fairness, or integrity in one's beliefs and actions, a man of honor. 2. Vanity, excessive pride in one's appearance, qualities, abilities, achievements, etc., character or quality of being vain, conceit. Failure to be elected was a great blow to his vanity. Within the human emotion of honor, one is drawn to feelings of loyalty, chivalry, and even faith in one's self and of others. A person who is honorable builds his entire character and his perspective of the world around him upon a system of righteousness that is dictated by a set code of ethics that ultimately will lead to that emotional fulfillment of being an honorable person. This virtue is very strict in its boundaries and does not leave room for any error. Those who fall short of achieving all its standards can quickly find themselves outcasts without any chance for a return to the status of being a person of honor. Most people who are considered heroes or from the heavenly places derive from this virtue, as it defines and dictates their persona as seen and understood by others and themselves. However, this virtue is one of the few where, if not closely watched, it can become a dangerous sin and become corrupted by its own nature, as well as blind not just one but large masses of people into believing what they do is right and honorable but is in actuality destructive and evil. The term total power corrupts totally is an example of philosophical description of this effect. Vanity is an opposing force and cosmic counterbalance to the virtue of honor. Instead of building upon a sense of what is right, vanity takes and turns that perspective inward towards what is right by one's own self and desires that pertain to self-fulfillment. Many men fall to vanity when they believe themselves to be great heroes for deeds of valor like saving someone's life. In the aftermath, many people gauge themselves as great heroes, which they then glorify themselves in pride, which they then begin building false beliefs of themselves and their capabilities. Although it is not wrong to allow yourself to be proud of great successes like saving someone's life or some other selfless act. Confidence is built from such emotions, but when that self-confidence begins to cloud one's view of themselves and they place themselves upon a metaphysical chain above others and become prideful for their deeds, then the self-confidence and selfless act transitions to vanity and pride. Defined as so, it is obvious why these two human qualities are natural opposing forces. These two are conflicting metaphysical fabrics of the cosmic balance. The definition of the two are as thus: wrath, vengeance or punishment as the consequence of anger. Strong, stern, or fierce anger, deeply resentful indignation. Justice, the moral principle determining just conduct, rightfulness or lawfulness, as of a claim or title, justness of ground or reason, the quality of being just, righteousness, equitableness, or moral rightness. Now, as it is obvious in their definitions, each are reactions to a preceding emotional perspective of a person being left feeling as though they have been wronged. The difference between these two are split into two paths, where the virtuous reaction is justice and the sinful reaction is wrath. Let us first examine justice. When one takes the path of justice, they choose to weigh the situation against the standards of what is right and what is wrong and examine the situation from all perspectives before allowing a decision to be made on the course of action to be taken to rectify the issue that has been caused by a person's actions. Justice upholds the moral compass of the majority and has often been the course of action by the masses. However, this virtue can easily be manipulated and taken out of context by those who would seek to blur the greater picture of things and have people view only portions of the full perspective of things, so that a sympathetic and incomplete perspective is attained. In doing so, the virtue of justice is tainted and becomes destructive in its nature, for it influences the masses to act and believe in a false and incomplete truth. This sinful deception has led to most of the wars and conflicts waged in both heaven and on earth, as well as in hell as well. The next topic is the sin of wrath, which in its definitive form is a result usually found through the tainting of justice. The masses who become influenced by the taint of justice usually turn to acts of wrath and vengeance to bring repercussions that are intended to bring balance to an unbalanced situation. Some who are innocent and naive to the ways of the world are often tempted to take actions of vengeance, usually at the manipulations of the guilty, trying to hide their guilt by the confusion and chaos caused by those who act in vengeance. Which is why vengeance and wrath is considered to be a more primitive and primal emotion than justice, based on the actions of the unaware, and manipulated to cause action that is based on more instinctive emotion than the more aware and controlled actions of those who act in accordance with justice. With these two traits of human nature, knowing the difference between the two is the advantage of being able to tell the difference between a sinful person and a righteous person. Now these two counterpart emotions are the least detailed and understood definitions I've come across yet. Another sign that this world has an egregious problem within its core. The standard definitions of these are as follows: love, a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person, a feeling of warm personal attachment or deep affection, as for a parent, child, or friend. Envy, a feeling of discontent or covetousness with regard to another's advantages, success, possessions, etc. Now the details within these emotions are a key building block in all things physical and metaphysical as well as inanimate. Just the design of an object can cause feelings of love and envy as well as many others. Many aspects within the intangible, or metaphysical, universe occur or are brought about by acts of love and envy. Let us start with the simple one first: envy. This sin can be reinterpreted as many different ways and types depending on the level of emotion that the person is feeling. Attributes connected to envy are jealousy, hate, covetousness, selfishness, and can progress to acts of obsession and violence quite easily. Many of the world's most heinous crimes have been attributed to underlying and overwhelming feelings of envy. It can cause a person to become blind to reason and lose control of their actions due to overwhelming amounts of envy. Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus because in his heart he was jealous of his destiny as the Messiah. Pontius Pilate was secretly envious of Jesus' ability to hold sway over large crowds of people without effort, a skill that he could use to become the emperor of Rome. He despised Jesus for wasting such an opportunity to be a pharaoh or emperor for the petty role of a god among the people. These are two examples of people who were swayed by the emotions of envy to act and make decisions that had horrible consequences and were in ethical terms even in their time to be wrong. I myself am the angel of hate when it come to the choir of heaven. On the appointed day of the Lord it is said that all the angels of the choir of heaven, each angel who was assigned an emotion that they represent, will stand before the Lord, and each of us shall gather all those who have experienced or committed acts of our attributed emotion, and their memories and deeds they did under those emotions will be transformed into a musical sound, and all the angels will sing a praise to the Lord, a hymn that will be heard by him and empower his ascension to throne of the omniscient being of his destiny, from which we shall witness the most glorious event for our dutiful service and faith to him. We shall witness him create existence. For time has no hold within heaven, because time is an aspect within creation. But I've told you that already. My point is, as the angel of hate, to understand love is difficult, but I shall for this defining of it, after which I shall have to forget these details I am to write. Love is an ever-present and encompassing emotion that is a central balance in all things. Even the Lord, who has stated that his main emotion while creating existence as well as us was love. It is tied to the divine spark within us and can empower a person to overcome great odds and succeed where the odds are stacked against them. Other emotions such as adoration, attraction, selflessness, generosity and peace can be derived from and acted upon the emotion of love. It also can easily become destructive and can blind a person's senses and logic, which can lead to things like delirium, insanity, jealousy, lust and even violence. It is an aspect that can be both divine in nature as well as destructive. I'm afraid that is all I have on that subject, for defining what I have is literally against my nature. These counterpart emotions are elusive in comparison to each other until you understand and compare their meanings. Only then is it obvious that they are the counterbalance for each other. They are defined as thus: patience, the quality of being patient, as the bearing of provocation, annoyance, misfortune, or pain, without complaint, loss of temper, irritation, or the like; quiet, steady perseverance, even-tempered care, diligence; greed, excessive or rapacious desire, especially for wealth or possessions. I know, I was surprised as well at the lack of definition provided for greed. Nevertheless, that's the standard social definition. All these technical definitions I offer in the first paragraph are derived from one source. But despite the shortcomings of their definition, I can provide ample information, having battled the manifested persona of this sin. Greed, as it is listed in definition, is the obsessive desire for possession of a material or immaterial object, person and/or place. Those who fall under the control of greed become obsessed with the subject, such as Gollum from the Lord of the Rings saga, for example. His pursuit and actions through each of the movies was a prime example of someone who has fallen into the obsessions of greed. They will do anything, sacrifice and denounce all that is personal and sacred to possess the object that they desire, including their own and others' lives, without remorse. This object can be anything tangible or intangible. For some, the object they so crave doesn't even have to really exist and can be something completely within their own imagination. They will still forsake everything to try to own it. This sin comes with a unique quality that allows others to betray oaths and vows that they have upheld for generations, and can turn the most pious saintly man into the most detestable heathen. It can turn the righteous into the wicked and Gordians into the adversary. One quality that this action is always true to is that it consumes all who attempt to wield or manipulate it. In the end, all are placed upon the altar of sacrifice, both the sinner and the just, and none are immune to its repercussions. Most often than not, it can be said that to use the art of manipulating greed to get what you want, you must sacrifice that which you hold of most value in return. Patience is the next, and once you compare the definitions you can see why they are opposing forces, for patience is the exact opposite in principality. The virtue of patience applies to attainment of wisdom and the path of understanding. If one wishes to truly learn all there is to understand a certain subject, then one must be patient and see and you understand all the perspectives of that subject. When trying to live a righteous and saintly life that is aligned with the path of the divine and virtuous ways, one must use patience and search for the right path and choose the virtuous opportunity once it presents itself, ignoring the temptations and insults and advice of others, to stay upon the path you know to be true. If you begin a journey knowing full well exactly what is to be done and know the steps to achieve your goal, then you need not the advice of others, no matter how sincere they may seem. Only turn to others for advice when you are unclear on the path before you. Be patient and seek that opportunity to which you know to be right. Seek guidance only when needed. This mantra, or system of belief, can be applied to many things in life. From parenting to jobs and even religious beliefs. Where greed is a harbinger or bringer of chaos, patience is a harbinger of balance. These two are seemingly obvious and self-explanatory, but that is what many are led to believe. The sin of adultery and the virtue of chastity go back and have much more deeper history and purpose than most realize. Let me begin first with their definition, which is short: adultery, voluntary sexual intercourse between a married person and someone other than his or her lawful spouse. Chastity, the state of being chaste, purity, abstention from sexual intercourse, virginity or celibacy, a vow of chastity. Well, it's obvious the site I get my definitions from dictionary.com is written most likely by the angel of chastity. It would explain the lack of definition. I shall elaborate better. Let us start with adultery. Now, this sin is the encompassment of temptation and directly tied to it, as temptation is a type of seduction. Also, it has a significant role in the history of exorcisms and demonic possessions. When the Catholic Church first began to support the endeavors of priests who were trying to battle the forces of darkness and expel demons from those under possession, they had a problem with priests in the regions they would dispatch that were close by falling to the manipulations and temptations of the demon, who would in turn pit the townspeople against him and discredit his reputation with allegations the priest could not deny. When the people began to realize the tricks of the demon using them to set the priest up, they resorted to more diabolical methods such as the ritualistic sex orgies we hear of in historic records. Most of the recorded events involving actual ritualistic orgies and gatherings of the sinful nature that was outside of the scheduled tradition of the year during the 900 AD and 1700 AD circa were more often than not events of demonic possessions of large masses who were focused on a goal of setting up and shaming a highly devout figure that they consider a threat. Being that the ritual performers would be the ones under possession and the high priest who would always remain hooded and masked was the one they sought to tarnish and damn with their deeds. This cycle of sin I suspect though goes back much further than those dates, but it was around that time the Catholic Church endeavored to design the process of exorcism and the strict rules and vows an exorcist must adhere to in order for the Church to sanctity and support the process. The priest is bestowed a power of authority that would be the earthly equivalent of an archangel on earth, with the power to command demons to reveal information that could place others in danger if their secrets are known to those not meant to. So therefore, since the priest is human and susceptible to commit sin, then he must always adhere to a strict code of conduct and piety and never stray lest the secrets he holds fall to the forces of evil, causing chaos and death to the innocent, as that priest would become like a fallen angel and great force of evil. That leads but also sums up the definition and purpose of chastity, for the process of exorcism is held firmly by the virtue of chastity and self-control against the temptations of sin as well as the resistance against demonic influence. These two are opposing forces of each other but on a very subtle level, which is why people fall to the sin of gluttony so easily. First I shall list the definitions. Forgiveness, the act of forgiving or the state of being forgiven. Willingness to forgive, act of forgiving, state of being forgiven. Gluttony, the act or practice of eating to excess, excessive eating and drinking. These definitions are weak and have no definition at all, but that explains the reason I have been called to this task. Let us start with forgiveness. Forgiveness is a virtue that is within the capacity of every living being and more. It is the quality that allows us to put down our convictions and move forward with our lives. Many people fall victim to becoming caught up in a cause or belief in something to the point where they no longer are in control of their lives and are dictated by that which has consumed them. This can be mistaken easily for those who become workaholics or those who join protests, consumed in the gluttony of their own deeds and beliefs that they don't realize what goes on around them or to people they care about. Through forgiveness we can let go of that obsession and consumed emotion that ties us to it and free ourselves of its control. The purpose of forgiveness is basically freedom for ourselves and others. Gluttony is a very sneaky sin that uses the illusion that nothing is wrong and can cause one to downplay the seriousness of a situation by convincing you that it's not as it seems. That is why the image of gluttony has always been depicted as an obese person, not because it pertains only to overeating but the self-indulgence within underestimating things about yourself and what's around you, causing you to lower your defenses and go against your better judgment. So as you can see by this definition, many fall victim to it in everyday life. These two are another sin and virtue that are only seen as counterparts when understanding their definition, which are as follows. Idolatry, the religious worship of idols, excessive or blind adoration, reverence, devotion, etc. Humility, the quality or condition of being humble, modest opinion or estimate of one's own importance, rank, etc. These are vague definitions at best. Let me go into detail as to bring a better understanding to them, beginning with humility. This virtue is quite important because it leads one to divinity and to the state of righteousness within. For only a humble man may find virtue itself and understand their meaning and purpose. The actions of selflessness and sacrifice for the sake of another and not one's self, the act of forgiveness, patience, honor, valor, altruism all rely and are based upon the aspect of one being humble enough to see the benefit of helping and doing for others without the possibility of benefiting themselves. The teachings of Jesus were only understood by those who were humble within, as he himself was like a beacon of humility, always looking towards the betterment of others and never himself. Now the counterpart to humility is of course idolatry, which seeks to place upon a shelf above others and their needs of importance any object that can be held as one of value. One can fall victim to this by becoming vain and prideful of their own achievements, and in their heart idolize themselves, thinking that they are better than others and should be looked upon as a hero. One can also do the same with objects and call others to see the beauty and reverence in an object, suggesting that they should offer homage and praise to that object's beauty. Now the finite details of this can be confused with self-confidence for actions of bravery, and it is not a sin to accept thanks nor reward for actions that deserve them. Self-confidence is built this way, which leads to people believing in themselves to become leaders and kings who can bring large numbers of people to live their lives as peaceful and righteous society. But it is when that self-confidence begins to become obsessive and destructive in its nature, causing people to become prideful, or as the expression calls it, to have a chip on their shoulder, then the self-confidence has fallen to pride, which leads to many other sins, idolatry being one possible fate.